It's strange how silence can become a kind of peace. For years, that's what I told myself, that moving on wasn't about forgetting someone, but about learning to live without the sound of their name echoing inside your mind. Time softened everything, turned sharp memories into blurred edges, and I thought I had made peace with the past. I didn't hate him anymore. I didn't love him either. Or at least, that's what I believed until the day he knocked again. It had been 6 years since we last spoke. 6 years since the version of me who loved him had packed her things and left behind more than she realized. Back then, love was something fierce and consuming. We were young and idealistic, thinking love alone could survive everything: distance, ambition, pride. But it didn't. Sometimes it's not the fights that end relationships. It's the quiet, growing distance that slowly steals your reflection from someone else's eyes. I remember the day I walked away as if I'm still watching it in slow motion. It wasn't a dramatic ending. There were no tears, no final words. Just silence. The kind that comes when two people realize they've already stopped reaching for the same future. I rebuilt my life in that silence. I learned to wake up alone without feeling empty. I learned how to laugh again without thinking of what he'd say. I started writing, gardening, traveling, doing everything I once said I'd do after love. And for a while, I believed that meant I was healed. But healing isn't forgetting. It's just learning to live with the echoes. That morning, the sky was gray, and I remember thinking how peaceful it looked. I had made tea, opened my window, and started sorting through old papers when I heard the knock, soft but deliberate, the kind that belongs to someone who already knows you'll answer. I don't know how I knew it was him. Maybe love leaves behind a frequency your body never forgets, a sound only your heart can recognize. When I opened the door, I almost didn't breathe. He looked the same, yet completely different. The years had written stories into his face, tiny lines near his eyes, a quieter kind of sadness in his smile. For a moment, we just looked at each other, the air thick with everything we weren't saying. There was no apology, no question, no plea, just recognition of what once was and what could never fully die. He said my name softly, like he was testing if it still fit. And I realized something then. It wasn't anger I felt. It was tenderness, the dangerous kind that tempts you to believe time can heal what time destroyed. We talked for hours that day. Not about us, at least not directly. We spoke about everything else: work, cities, mutual friends, loss, even the weather. But under every word was a shared truth neither of us wanted to disturb, that we were both still here, still human, still unfinished. When he left, he said he'd like to see me again. I didn't answer, but when I closed the door, I didn't lock it either. Over the next few weeks, we met again. Sometimes for coffee, sometimes for silence. He told me about his life, about how he'd tried to find meaning in other people, other places. He spoke about regrets in fragments, never directly, but always with sincerity. I listened, not because I needed his apology, but because I finally understood that forgiveness isn't about setting the other person free. It's about setting yourself free from the story you keep replaying. I thought I was safe, that the past couldn't touch me anymore. But then he smiled at me the same way he used to, and I felt the years dissolve. It's terrifying how the heart remembers. It doesn't care about time or logic. It recognizes only presence. One evening, he walked me home, and we stood outside as the wind played through the trees. He said it felt like no time had passed at all. I almost believed him. But love isn't measured in time. It's measured in who we become after it ends. And we were both different now. Softer, more cautious, more aware of what love costs when you give it recklessly. He told me he was moving to another city, one I had once dreamed of living in. He said he wanted to ask me to come, but he wouldn't, because he didn't want to make me choose. It was strange hearing that kind of selflessness from the same man who once walked away without looking back. But that's what time does. It humbles the heart and teaches it tenderness. That night, I couldn't sleep. I thought about the girl I used to be, the one who waited for him at train stations, who wrote letters she never sent, who mistook pain for passion. I realized I didn't want to be her again, even if it meant loving him one more time. I had learned how to be whole on my own. Going back would mean unlearning everything healing had taught me. When he came to say goodbye, I met him at the same place we first met years ago, the old cafe by the hill. We talked like old friends do, comfortably and carefully, each word a small piece of closure. When he stood to leave, he looked at me one last time and said, "I'm glad it was you." There was no promise to stay in touch, no plea to try again, just acceptance. The kind that comes when you know love has done all it can. After he left, I sat there for a long time, watching the sun move across the table, thinking about how love changes shape but never disappears. Some people aren't meant to stay forever. They're meant to remind you what love feels like before it fades into peace. Months passed. Life returned to its rhythm, quiet but not empty. Every now and then I thought of him, not with longing, but with gratitude. He had returned not to reignite something old, but to show me that the wound I thought was permanent had healed without me noticing. He became the proof that closure doesn't always come through goodbye. Sometimes it arrives when you realize you no longer need one. Now, whenever I hear a soft knock, I don't flinch. I don't expect the past to return. I simply smile, remembering that the version of me who once needed him finally learned that love doesn't always mean staying. Sometimes it means knowing when to let go, even when they come back. Because love isn't about beginning again. It's about recognizing when the story has already found its ending and realizing that, for the first time, you're not sad about it.